You found a really good Japanese show yesterday. It is too hard for you to study off of, but it's still a really interesting show. That's perfectly fine. Can you pick up a few words here and there? Yes, exactly. Yes, you're watching with English subs, but you're trying your best to listen if you can pick up any of those Japanese words. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can even do the opposite as well. You can read a scene in English, right? Read the subtitles in a scene in English, prime yourself, and go back and see if you can pick up even more, right? That's always a fun little exercise too. I bounce between the two. So sometimes I would watch something that I know the English for. So what I mean is maybe you have a favorite show or like a show that you like to go back to every once in a while. So you already know the context of the English, but you're primed. That means you're primed. And what happens is if you spend some time away, you might not necessarily know what the exact words are anymore, even in English, like the English subtitles, but you know the ideas that are floating around. So then you can like watch it again, only you can frame and be prepared for some of the ideas that you already know. What, in my opinion, what that does is it encourages you to recall more Japanese without aid, right? Without the context of your learning stuff, your learning material. So now you're recalling in the sense of, for example, if you go to a movie and you're gonna watch something in English, it's a superhero movie. Well, you technically already know what might occur in the language you're using, right? However, you can also do it with the language you're learning. I sometimes do this. I sometimes do it this way with stuff that I have already watched, and then the other way where I don't know what to expect from the stuff. So sometimes you can like get some extra pep from this and extra pep from this. So then you're less limited to being watching very specific things. You can watch more things, like things that you might have seen already and you might revisit. Watching old things that you have seen already in a new context can be really excellent in providing newer meaning to everything, because now you're building on top of already existing memory. So that's kind of a alternative thing to do, or try anyway. I actually watch English with English subtitles as well. So not only do I'm a everything kind of guy, so I actually watch with closed captions and subtitles regardless of the language. So if they're speaking English, I still have English subtitles. Seeing the written form of things is very different input than hearing, right, and seeing. So a lot of times if I'm really active, like I really want to be active, I also have I mix and match. So anime with Japanese subtitles, an English anime. Yes, I know how that sounds, but an English anime that's written in the English cadence, which there are a lot of them now. You know, English with English subtitles, English with Japanese if it's available, and then Japanese with Japanese subtitles and Japanese with English subtitles. So you got many different ways to kind of make you not feel like you're doing the same thing, right? I think going back and forth, like one day you're going to do this, one day you're going to do that, but you're still focused on the same pool of content. It mixes up the things and keeps you on your toes. It's a slight mix up. Like in the end of the day, you're either gonna comprehend the thing or not. but mixing it up definitely keeps one engaged. So you're constantly like doing slightly different things. The longer you continue to do exactly identical things, it can can become incredibly dependent on new content, right? So sometimes content runs out, or sometimes content doesn't excite you anymore, or you have to wait on content. So revisiting older content in a different perspective is kind of very underrated. I actually think nowadays, when it comes to content consumption, not returning to an old content with new lens is kind of like discarding your memory that you've already invested in. So like for me, I'm revisiting a lot of my English when I'm learning Japanese, and I'm revisiting a lot of my Japanese and English while starting on the Mandarin. So over time, the things that are most important to you, you're reusing. And when you're reusing that stuff, you can kind of think of your brain as more of a neural network, right? It takes time to groom and change. However, if all the stuff is already there, like your bridges, just imagine your neural networks. If all the bridges are already made, you can decorate those bridges. You can make those bridges even better. So you can pave and cross old bridges with your new target language. So go back and, in my opinion, it's very underrated. Go back to the things you typically do. Go back to old things that you do exclusively in your common language. Now use your target language to do it. And it becomes second nature, in my opinion. It becomes a lot quicker in second nature. So all the things you typically do now, if you slowly integrate your target language, then it feels just like your common language or your mother language, right? It'll become like, instead of saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna turn on the pasokon. Now I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna turn on the pasokon. I understand what you mean. I'll need to try that more instead of just studying through typical study methods. Yeah, yeah. Add on, in as opposed to like instead, all of the above, right? Integrate as many ideas as you can, reasonably, with like the available amount of time that you have. Honestly, the logic kind of checks out the way I'm suggesting this. If your daily life, the things you're doing in daily life, is constantly in a specific language, and you're able to slowly get to choose which language you use in your daily activities, isn't that becoming a native speaker, so to speak? Like, what I mean is, next to uprooting your life and going to Japan, which means your whole life has to change, your entire life has to change, you have a life now, and you do things now in your life. So if you're able to frame all those things in your in your target language you're interested in, it's the next closest thing, because all your stuff is already rooted in it. So every time when I actually, for Mandarin right now, every time I go to talk to my parents, I actually use all the new Mandarin words that that I learned just recently, because my parents are available. But you can do it with yourself most of the time. When I go out for a run, I look at random objects while I'm running, and I'm like, can I say that yet? Ie, kuruma, ki, right? Michi, the street, right? The street. Hashirimasu, right? Things like that. I don't know how to say sky yet, but kumori, today was kumori. Tenki, right? Tenki. Not it's not really natsu yet. Haru, right? Haru no hi. Pretty good. Pretty good. Slowly, steadily. Soda? Oh yeah, that's right. Soda. Right. Soda is Kai. That's right. Good call. Good call. Hello there, Cozy. How are you? How are you, Cozy?
今年
Kotoshi.
今年
Okay. Going to bake a matcha cake, alright. Matcha
抹茶抹茶
のケーキ
ケーキが
が焼きたいです。
焼きたいです。
1日 Oh, I count a lot. Honestly, counting things is a lot of fun. For real though. The reason why I started counting things is I don't know if you watch mukbangs, where people just eat stuff, but there's this one. There a lot of people who travel when they eat, they would try to speak a little bit of the language that they're visiting the country. So one of the videos I watched, of someone eating nabe actually, nabe shabu shabu, nabe and shabu shabu. They were counting the plates, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of fun too. So let's go count random things. It's like I have 3, like for example, I don't know what buns are, but at the moment, but bun or mitsu, yeah, mitsu ga arimasu. So, cheers. Or itadakimasu. Right. That's your biggest issue. I need to start doing that more, but I'm so bad with Japanese number and dates. Start somewhere. I think like Duolingo, what they do is they start with a few numbers. So I've been using those numbers as I'm going, right? Nowadays, there is a slight disclaimer. I already knew most of the numbers before we start Duolingo. However, you start with a few numbers and then go up with the numbers. Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3, etc. I mean, Japanese people still use the like Roman numerals for sure. So I still read and think about them in English. Slow, steady association. I think thinking about the English then the Japanese, English then Japanese, at some point it'll become, in my opinion, it'll become second nature where you can leap past the English. So I didn't stray away from the English. So when I started, it's like one thing. Okay, so that's one thing, right? And then hitotsu. One thing. Hitotsu. One thing. Hitotsu. And then at some point, it's like, well, I can't think of the one thing, but I say hitotsu instead. So you don't have to necessarily keep fighting your urge to think of English. You can form the association, and then the association can become eventually slow and steady repetition. It can be linked so much that hitotsu just comes out, in my opinion. I don't think cold turkeying it personally for me promotes the encouraging environment that requires someone to naturally start feeling like you can live with 2 languages, because you're not living with one language, you're living with 2, if not 3 languages. It's very different from those who want to move to Japan. In my opinion, I'm not sure if you want to live in one language most of your life, but for me, I want to live in a world where I'm using more than one language. So regardless of when Japanese will naturally come to me, I still preserve my English. So I might as well embrace and create connections between the 2 languages. It is certainly your choice to do so or not. I have enough energy to constantly think of both at the same time. So definitely a thing to choose. Yeah, for some reason, numbers and languages are really hard. They're abstractions, right? Numbers tend to be the most abstract discipline. Even in your native language, math is an abstraction that might not be quite meaningful at first, often. Do you feel more natural with Chinese, even though I assume you know more Japanese? I am. I'm incredibly more. I feel like if it's feelings involved, right? When you're saying feel more natural, regardless of what I learn in Chinese, whether I make errors or I hear pronunciations, I feel at home. So it's more like me playing in a playground that I already know. As in, the playground itself feels familiar. While Japanese, you still have to account for a lot of unfamiliar things. Like you always have that semblance, or at least I feel like I always have that semblance of, yeah, this feels good. In Japanese, whenever I see a new word or pronounce a new word, I'm like, I'll get there when I get there. In Chinese, I'm like, oh, huh. You're such a familiar face, yet I can't quite place my finger on why you're so familiar. And the presumption that I'm making is at some point in my life, I've heard this combination of sounds. I've seen these combination of strokes. So yeah, the first day one, it felt like a great contrast to Japanese. So I actually quite love to balance these two now. Because in Japanese, I will have a different perspective and different mindset. And I'm learning Japanese differently, really. And then when we get to Duolingo Chinese, wow, the courses are structured in slightly similar ways and different ways. My interaction with Chinese is much different than my interaction with Japanese. And what that makes for me personally for learning is I make my complete day of language learning dynamic. So that's kind of what I feel is I don't want to say like a life hack or something, but that is the secret sauce in my opinion, and it's not really like a singular sauce. What I'm saying is it's creating a different learning environment for everything, right? I think one of the biggest detriments to a person, like intuitively, if you're not aware of this, that's perfectly fine. But productivity, in my opinion, tanks a lot of times when it comes to how long you stay in a groove. Because a groove can become more efficient, certainly. It can save you time. However, it makes you less and less actively participating in it. You're becoming more efficient, so you spend less and less time, right? So if you're able to juggle enough things with your free time, like say you play video games for an hour, you do homework for an hour, and then you do language learning for an hour, and then you go watch anime, whatever the amount of time, it's up to the individual, right? This is individually rated. If you can fill your efficiency of your time by engaging just enough to meet your goals in something and engaging in something else, your whole day becomes a bit more optimized for active engagement. So we all know, right? We all can accept that even within the day and across months, but even within the day, if you do a task long enough, you'll reach diminished return. Your attention and stuff will wane, and that's up to you to accurately determine when you're getting diminished return. And when you get diminished return, you stop there, you cut it off at some point, and you ask yourself, is that time you can do worth engaging in something else that is unrelated to it, so that you can stay engaged for the day and come back to it? some people can choose to grind it out because that's the only thing they want to do, right? So what happens is they're gonna grind, and they're gonna hit diminished return, and they're gonna keep repeating it. And then you extend it by 30 days, you realize even from day to day, your baseline engagement is gonna continue to drop over the course of a month. So adding Duolingo Chinese to my Japanese was a way to still continue language learning, but now I have a different feel for it. So the feeling is different. So when I'm learning Japanese, I feel a certain way, and when I'm learning Chinese, it's a different way. So I'm not doing the same thing per se. The context and semantics, that's irrelevant to how consistent you can be in engaging things. So that's kind of why I decided now would be a great time to add, because I've already been sprinkling way too many different engagement things in Duolingo Japanese. So it's not that I don't want to stop. I don't want to continue doing that for a while. So I added Chinese, and maybe even learning Chinese will help me integrate new things into Japanese, and then vice versa. So that's kind of the plan. Same. Think the natural feeling needs years of immersion to get. Yeah, like the amount of time someone takes up to grow up. Yeah, exactly. So I have that's what I call it. Like I'm an immersion baby. Granola. I'm in an immersion baby for Chinese. So it feels comfortable even when I'm making mistakes. It's so common to me growing up that it's very different from Japanese. Like I'm fairly comfortable with people criticizing my Japanese and all that stuff, but I'm even more comfortable with Chinese. That's great. It's nice. Very nice. You have tried grinding study materials a few times. It always burns you out. Yeah. It's a human condition, by the way. You're not alone. At some point when you're grinding, when you get to the point of pushing yourself to grinding, it will burn you out. And burnout can be a great thing for some people, but it can be terrible for other people where it just causes you to stop completely, right? So usually the best way you found to continue with Japanese learning is learn a bit each day, yeah, and then try to just spend the rest of your time, yeah, engaging in content wherever and how little you can. Exactly. I call that microdosing. So the word I use is microdosing, where off and on throughout the day, off and on, right, on and off. And what's happening, in my opinion, is when you're doing on and off, you're also creating dynamic input. What I mean by that is that input is nebulous. So you're less focused on structure and function, right? Structure and function, but engagement. Now, we're not talking about exclusivity. I do not promote that, only do this, only do this. The idea is you are doing this and structure studies. So the burnout, that whole idea of burnout is what I'm talking about that diminished return over time when you're constantly doing the same thing or a very similar thing. So having a balance between days or times within a day or across a day, not doing the same ish thing, keeps this diminished return from happening. And eventually the burnout state is when you reach a point where you feel nothing is changing. It's whatever, it's an arbitrary line. That burnout is when you collectively, psychologically find that, yeah, this isn't working anymore, right? Or I can't do this anymore. It's not manageable, right? Because diminished return kicks in a lot. So the idea for me is, it's the word I've been trying to use, but I think I might confuse people with this, is try to aim for comprehensive input. As in, know where your diminished return kicks in, stop, go do something else that is related to your goal and task. Become creative in finding any little thing you gain, because that is like optimizing your days for engagement as opposed to optimizing it for your progress or something like that. Something that is consistent. You don't want to optimize for consistency in that nature if you're already getting to the point of grinding and being burned out. It's kind of like the whole thing of work and life balance, really. The rest of your content, wherever, like playing games, even if I only understand 10 to 15%. Yep, watching shows, etc. You've gotten to the point now where I can understand enough to stumble through games. Excellent. Yeah, but there was a time where I felt pretty bad understanding only like 10 to 15% and trying to push through. Yeah, so we talked, I talk a lot about the Dunning Kruger. I always mess this name up, sorry. Their name up. But I think what you're describing is you've gotten to the point where you hit the valley of despair. But now you're kind of at a point where you're a steady state, like a super steady state. This is the steady state. And a lot of people refer to this as the enlightened state, where basically you accepted what you don't know, and you're okay with it. With all that you don't know, you still strive for competency. So you're steady stating going up. So you're doing whatever you can to learn, but knowing that you should be comfortable and accepting that there's going to be more things you don't know. In fact, incredibly more things you don't know. And that's kind of what you described just now, where initially you were doing like maybe you're overzealous, right? Most of us start very overzealous. And then at some point you're like, okay, I really need to like strap down and start doing structure work. And at some point you realize, oh, dude, there's so much. Like at some point you're gonna say, it feels like it's a lofty goal that can't be reached. This is usually called the valley of despair. However, once you climb, at some point you're going to be enlightened to the idea like, yeah, there's a lot of things I don't know, but you know what, doing and actively engaging over time will promote the steady state of being proficient at something. At least that's what you describe. It's very classic textbook, and classic textbook in a great way, because if you can't really observe these things, you're gonna have to discover what works. And personally, being classical in the way that you're approaching this makes it very predictable. I love the Dunning-Kruger, don't I? Kind of. There are lots of cons, but most people don't go around saying the Dunning-Kruger thing is unhelpful. If it's or is super helpful. So if they say it's super helpful, then I will probably point out all the things that Dunning-Kruger stuff doesn't. Well, so like a big con to Dunning-Kruger, right? No one has challenged me on like saying, oh, this is the best thing ever. I'm not saying Dunning-Kruger thing is the best thing ever. There's actually a lot of cons. So I can provide a con for you. Sometimes this creates a competence ceiling. Competence ceiling. So if you are aware of this thing, you could become too accepting of unknowns. Unknowns. You become accepting of unknowns, and then you have a glass ceiling on on your competence. As in, if you keep accepting unknowns, you might become too incompetent. Too incompetent to improve. So that can happen. And I don't always talk about it. That would be an oversimplification. Yeah, that would be oversimplification. I just happened to be talking about it the last actually the last time I talked about it was 4 days ago. And then before that was 16 days ago. So it's a coincidence that you think I always talk about it. And you just happen to be here when I'm talking about it. Also, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is another one that's related to this Dunning-Kruger. So imposter syndrome is when you think you're terrible at everything. You're terrible at everything, but you're actually pretty skilled, right? So if you're constantly accepting of the unknowns, sometimes you're actually a skilled expert, but you're almost unintentionally underselling your performance, which leads to the glass ceiling effect, where say you undersell yourself, you underappreciate yourself, and then you cap your own potential because you keep accepting that there's more to learn and there are people better than you, even though you yourself may be a statistical expert, right? Like statistically, you might end up being an expert. Yeah, so that can happen too. Yeah. Anyways, also the reason why this the Dunning-Kruger comes up a lot is because we're talking about learning, right? So we're talking about learning, and since most people who are enlightened, they tend not to engage with learning content. So what I mean is when most people are already here, they're about doing their own thing. What is the optimization of time, right? The thing I was talking about, when you're optimizing time, then those people, I actually do expect, like Greg and others, to spend only a portion of their time engaging with, like, for example, something like this, what I'm doing now, something like this. Because the whole point of being enlightened, the way I'm suggesting, is having the expectation that people will divide their time up to engage differently. So it's very common to do that. Too many people way undersell your skills, etc. Yeah. So, here's like the unfortunate paradox that I have. If I talk to someone for a while, right? Maybe I expect to talk to people in short bursts. And when I don't see the people, they can either be disinterested or they found their way. Because busy, successful, enlightened people will continue to do what I would commonly, in my opinion, are likely to do what I commonly suggest, which is to engage yourself in as many things as you can manage that involves the same goals, that keeps that whole complacency down. So they're constantly passionately optimizing their time, not to the task that they have, but optimizing their time for engagement and development. And that's kind of the reason. If you take that all together, it typically means that the people I interact with most consistently will be people at the beginning of something, as opposed to at the end of something, right? Or a proficient. People who already know Japanese is not going to hang around as much because they're busy learning Japanese. You have things to offer, but yet they think you're dumb. It's to be expected. It's confirmed when you say your stuff. So it's confirmed to be expected, right? And that's kind of why I can do it all the time. So if I have to talk about these things every single day, I will do these things every single day, knowing that unless I'm a Japanese expert or some superstar pro esports person, I'm not offering anything that would be interesting to someone who's incredibly focused on the task at hand, like just learning Japanese. So naturally, most of my time will be invested in writing stuff like, oh, I just started last week, or I just started. Most of the comments that I've written, like yesterday or today as well, I written a comment to someone who just started Japanese. And the reason you have to expect is that I've only studied Japanese for 100 days, right? So anyone below would naturally be inclined to maybe be curious and ask. Anyone above would naturally be either a spectator or they're disinterested. If they're successful, I expect them to be disinterested. Successful people take, learn, and go off into the distance. So it's like a bittersweet thing. I think that's kind of like what describes a teacher's journey. A teacher's journey. You have a limited time with brilliant students, right? Or impressionable people, right? People that hopefully are amenable, like open to your suggestion, and you have a limited time. Sometimes you only have 1 year, and not even 1 year in total time. Just 3 times a week, maybe for 1 hour. And then they go off. They go off and do their thing. If you get lucky, every maybe 2 years or 4 years, they might come back and tell you what they did. All the things that worked, all the things that didn't, and then they go off again and go do their thing, right? And the biggest reward you get as a teacher or someone in education is that when they come back to you, they're successful and they keep sharing things about their success that you set the foundations for, or you had a hand in the foundations. And that's kind of like the stuff I expect. It makes me smile because it's bad. This is bad, by the way, for algorithms or algorithms and like content creation and whatnot, right? The current state of doing this. Luckily, I don't do this as a job, right? It is because consistent viewership is how algorithms work, right? Consistent viewership is how algorithms work. But you can't have consistent viewership if you're constantly motivating people to be awesome. However, it's bad for algorithm, but I didn't say it's bad for business. Like, it's not so bad for business. So what I mean is, while it's not my job to be a content creator, to keep people stuck to my channel, like stuck to my advice, or becoming this word is very important to me, becoming dependent on parasocial relationships, right? What I mean is, even if I'm a hobbyist, right? Even if I'm a hobbyist, that doesn't excuse me from being professional about it. So what I mean by that is, oh yeah, if you use your shield as a hobbyist, it's like, oh yeah, I can't ruin people's lives. I'm not taking this seriously. It's not my job. I wouldn't be responsible for ruining people's lives or influencing them in a way that was unintentionally detrimental. That's not how I approach a hobby if you're streaming, right? If you're content creation, right? So while it's not a job, there are many ways to be professional in a public space while educating in a hobby, because I want to do that because I'm more used to the whole professional thing, and while at the same time discouraging dependency. I think one of the devastating situations about the internet right now is having someone completely stuck to someone, and that person might not even be aware of it. Like, for example, when you're, and not reasonably too, because if you're very popular, there are millions of people that have parasocial relationships with you, but you can't possibly know the details and their existence in this group. They're collectively a group. So in that case, when a job is a content creator, like content creation is your job, this stuff can be very real. As in, there are going to be groups of people that are dependent on you. So you've created an unintentional dependency. Like, oh yeah, every day I must watch this person at least for 3 hours. It makes me feel home. And over time, I'm scared. This is what I'm scared of. That's what TikTok is. I'm concerned about that. So for me, the irony here, or the paradox here, is in order to be a successful like content creator, you have to create dependency. That dependency is what keeps your viewership and stuff consistent. However, there are alternative ways to do other things. You can do business without creating the dependency to get that revenue. How does that look? The influencers that I love to watch, they work professionally in a different capacity. They do not use their content creation as a way to keep people stuck to the screen. They do things in the background to create businesses or like platforms to encourage people to not be dependent, to be independent, so that they can choose to use their time. Like, some part of me wish I could spend all the time in the world with like Lotus and Indy, but they have their lives, right? And as a person who's more proactive in lifestyle skills, trying to frame my content to keep you engaged onto the channel is it's a conflict of interest for me, because I know that you can probably be doing great things with that time if you are already successful and come back and tell me about those things. Like, I wanted to see those things. That's kind of what a teacher wants, right? The last thing you want is you spend a year on a student and then the student keeps coming back for you for help, as in like they don't want to move on and work with another teacher, move on to learn more things and become a teacher themselves, and so they keep coming back to you. Then they'll be stuck dependent on you. It's kind of like tools becoming too dependent on a tool. So while it's awesome to have someone really, really engaged and dependent on you, I love the idea that whatever I decide to do, I'm encouraging people to be more independent. So I can't have the cake and eat it. If I'm focusing on getting people to critically think and stay independent thinkers, they're less and less dependent on me for ideas, or less and less dependent on staying with the same thing. I'm literally encouraging people to go explore as opposed to staying with me. Like, oh, hey, don't worry, guys. Stay tuned. Next time, I'll provide all the things. This is the one-stop shop. Does that sound familiar? This is the one-stop shop for all your content. I'll start cooking soon. So then you can just watch whatever, drop all your cooking things and then watch me cook. And then that's kind of funny, watch me cook. Or like, okay, I'm gonna move to this language, like polyglots. Like, oh, don't worry about all the other languages. I'll learn all the languages. You stay and get stuck with me, right? That is great for content creation, right? You start 10 different channels and each channel is dedicated to some aspect of the person's life. But then you become the one-stop shop for all that information. For me, I think that's so idealistically scary that it is literally and figuratively the opposite thing that I'm encouraging. Do not get all your information from one source. Do not engage in only one form of presentation presented by one form of group or people, right? You have to get lots of things. It's literally the same example for language learning. Do not, in my opinion, I heavily discourage people from sticking to one method, just one of everything, because you're glass ceiling yourself. It, as a human being, you have way more potential than saying, I should do it this way and only this way. I should only listen to this one person and only this one person. So naturally, if you ever ask me, I'm probably not going to turn this into a job because it's a conflict of interest. The thing I'm trying to promote is a conflict of interest. It legitimately negates people from saying. So instead, don't listen to the streamer. Instead, I set this. It's not so bad for business. So what I'm going to do in the future is I'm going to turn something else into a business thing and have that make it possible. So I'm working on my professional skills and things I need to make something that doesn't create dependency on me. Because I don't want people glued, in my opinion, personally, if you want to hear me, I don't want people glued to needing like me or things I do as a necessary thing that they have to do something. I want people to be independent. I think one of the biggest concerns I have about raising a child in the future, I really do want to raise a child, like raising a child or teaching in the future, is that everyone's competing for these children and younger adults to be stuck to one thing. And that's unmoderated right now. In the United States, that's a concern right now, right? There's legalities and government policies that are trying to tackle this very question. What is a dangerous level of engagement? Like what is a dangerous level of emotional abuse? Like not in the sense of direct, but emotional abuse that causes someone to be stuck to one thing, and then the productivity goes out the window. So that's kind of my scariest nightmare scenario, where you're just stuck on TikTok, right? Because it's modeled after a way to retain you, not help you promote like educational things. It's to retain you in that position, and that sucks, in my opinion. It keeps people from learning. It keeps people from living. It keeps people from finding happiness. So, we shouldn't go down that morbid path right now. I don't think it's that crazy. That sounded a little bit extreme. I actually think it'll work itself out most of the time. I'm just catching up. I had to pause your stream because of work. But yes, the valley of despair is exactly what I would call it. I would study many hours a day, but felt like I couldn't read or listen. Exactly. Yeah, you are in the valley of despair. But don't despair. That's kind of awkward. I feel whatever you said about microdosing, that is enlightenment, Greg. That is total enlightenment, though. You're getting to the path of enlightenment where you're more accepting of not knowing and doing. That's because I think you're perfectly more than competent at this point, because there was just so much you didn't know, even after all the time and effort you put in. Yeah, I felt like there was just this big impassable wall. Yep, the valley of despair. There was like a minimum amount of Japanese I needed to just shove into your brain just to even get started reading kids books, etc. Yeah, and it felt like it would be in the beginner, you would begin in the beginner stage forever. Yep, welcome to the valley of despair. But it's, I would say, for a lot of scholars, that is the beginning of the journey. Now you're in the state of mind, in my opinion, you're likely in the state of mind where any input is active input, as opposed to still in that state of mind where you're constantly optimizing for input. Optimizing for input is still not promoting input. So that sounds perfect, Greg. Yeah, you described it really well. So that's why I brought up the Dunning-Kruger thing. But yeah, anyways, good digression. I'll probably like section this off into another thing, but generally speaking, yeah, all this stuff intersects. When you slowly get out of the valley of despair in any skill, and I'm not even talking about Japanese, any skill whatsoever, there will be a point in which your curiosity and your investment will reveal how much you don't know, and it's literally unachievable by one human being. So finding ways to navigate that emotionally and then still continue to engage knowing that's the reality is what I would consider the word enlightened. An enlightened person is one that is comfortably, fathomably acceptable in all the things they can't possibly know, but will continue to try to know. And in that way, you are both happy, like knowing what you don't know, but at the same time, consistently and unconditionally happy in continuing to strive to be more competent. Doesn't that sound like enlightenment to you? In my opinion, that's my like definition of what an enlightened state is. So you might want to get a second opinion. Obviously, second opinions are a lot. There are a lot of different perspectives on framing what that's like. Yes, I would. So yes, I would watch a ton of videos on how to learn Japanese instead of actually learning Japanese. Yeah, but I fell and got back up enough times where I have found what works for you now. For now, anyways. Yep, that sounds amazing. Continue to discover and rediscover and iterate. I think nowadays, sharing, when you're like enlightened, sharing and teaching what you have learned so far is a great way to remind yourself and constantly remind yourself how much you do actually know. Because I think the valley of despair sometimes catch people off guard and they don't leave the valley of despair because there's no way to actualize it. Oftentimes you're so apprehensive you do not output anything at all. So at some point, even learning while you're still continuing learning, your insecurities and apprehensions will build up to the point where you don't even output. A great way to output something is to engage in teaching someone else or sharing what you learn. So most of the time, when I hear someone learning something, I'm asking them, what did you learn? For what reasons did you learn? What is interesting to you? Because oftentimes I think people who are really brilliant comprehend a lot of things, like know a lot of things, but they generally have a huge wall of insecurity to attempt to output it, because there's this like ideal situation where most people would think, I have to be ready for this. The reality is you aren't ever fully ready to output something, especially a skill that involves interacting with another human being. Unless you're telepathic, that discomfort and that insecurity will exist. So naturally, I would press for someone. If I know someone is scholarly interested and they've done a lot of input, it takes like one person, maybe a few people, to, or like a friend or a family member, to ask them, can you show me some of the stuff you've been working on? Like, tell me something. Express to me and teach me something. To me, when someone is really, really down on how much effort they're shoving in input, it takes one person's curiosity to remind that one person they learned a lot. Or learned not a lot. It can go the other way, obviously. But generally, I pick the people who I feel are enlightened. As in, I have very clear distinction that this person is troubleshooting, went through a lot of things, fell down, fell over, got up, did flips and stuff. So asking what you learned, what's exciting to you, what are you doing, usually you can do that yourself. But if you're not used to it, then you wouldn't express that most of the time. So for me, I record myself. I journal, I do internal monologues. So I don't necessarily think I'm very dependent on another person. However, it still feels fantastic when someone comes up to you and say, hey, you know what? I saw all the things you're doing. Keep up the great work. Hey, can you tell me something about what you learned? And then that's fantastic. So I like to give the opportunity to everyone else too. If it just so happens, right, I bump into someone who's spent a lot of time doing something, it changes the world, in my opinion. It can change a person's world when you ask them, hey, you said you spent 4 years doing this. Can you tell me something about it and tell me how it makes you feel? Because there are a lot of people, in my opinion, nowadays, they can spend several years and have no output to remind them of all the things that they worked on. That's affirmation, but acquired like that's someone who can't take affirmation, as opposed to someone who's seeking affirmation. So there are people who, go around like they spend 3 weeks doing a life hack, and then they go around it's like, I'm an expert now. Can tell I'm gonna blur all this stuff out and tell me how cool I am. That's like the the hill of incompetence. But when you see someone who you clearly know they know a lot of things, but they're just not saying any of it, that to me is a telltale sign that that person didn't get a lot of opportunities to express it. So be mindful. I tend to remind people, if I'm aggressively asking you questions, to me, it's my way of kind of telling you that you probably know a lot more than you think, and you're probably way more competent than you think, because you're coming from the valley of despair. You're not on top of the hill of incompetence. That's kind of how I want to end this message, right? That's the take-home message from this digression, which I'll probably make into a video and stuff, right? If someone is asking you questions, earnestly, right? Earnestly. There's a level of trust. There's a level of trust already given. Right? Level of trust already given. If you're worried about your own progress, in my opinion, worry about your own progress, like your competence. If you can find it past your insecurities, because the internet is a scary place. Whenever you offer advice, right, the internet is a scary place. So in a public place, right, it can backfire. But if you understand the risks, right, and you accept the risks, this insecurity goes down. And it might be just that someone you answer that question that reminds you, in my opinion, that reminds you that you worked hard. You worked hard for something, right? I'm not trying to brush over it. This is a silver lining, because on the internet, in my opinion, enlightened individuals, or individuals that appear enlightened, are the exceptions, not the rule. Vocal minorities are often not enlightened, and they are often very emotional, right? They're often very emotional in not a way that is constructive to intellectual sharing. So yes, we have to keep in mind that enlightened individuals likely say nothing. They usually say nothing. They try not to say anything because they're gathering information, right? And if they're healthy, they're not going to say anything. You don't say anything because you're constantly worried about gathering more information. So keep in mind that that is true. However, you can circumnavigate the insecurities. Take that risk every once in a while. For me, I stream. That's what I do. So for every person that thinks I'm dumb, right? And it's going to happen, thinks that I am dumb and, you know, I lack experience or etc., that's fine, because they only knew me for like 5 seconds, right? Or sometimes I feel like I'm exaggerating, but 5 seconds, that's perfectly fine. I understand that that's what it's like, because it's the exception. You're looking for enlightened people who are the exception, not the rule. And it's not that these people are malicious at all, in my opinion. Some of them are, but that's a whole different story, like that trolls and bots and whatnot. But they're not trying to be malicious. They're more hustled. They're hustle cultured, as in the internet creates this efficiency. So you can't make snap judgments and find statistical correlations like, oh, this guy's they live stream on Twitch and they're using Duolingo, so naturally the high statistical probability is this person is casually learning language and not taking it seriously. So there you go, right? Speaking of bots, I just got a bot on Twitch. Yeah, you know, there's a bot, right? So anyways, that's kind of what I want to leave off on. I feel teaching and explaining, someone who openly wants to hear what you talk about, can be super refreshing. It can be electric. Whether that person learns anything is perfectly fine. What you get to do is you offer yourself the opportunity to show something, if not to yourself, to that other person, right? You know, to yourself or the other person. I actually use this stage a lot when talking to college students here and there who are super depressed or like really concerned about their progress. Like they're about to graduate and they're still not certain what they're going to do. They're not even sure they know how to do a lot of things. And oftentimes I'm like, have you taught anyone something? Have you do you have friends that you could share what you know? Sometimes when you're outputting something every once in a while and then you have some feedback, it can be incredibly electric. Like it can charge you up again. And for me, it's every day because I'm recording myself, right? If you want to see the crazy other end, for me, I output every single day. So I disagree on the approaches that other people do about input for language learning, right? That's great if you have a mentality that you're right, you know the perfect way of doing things, and you'll follow through no matter what it is. You can hold your I don't know, your energy for 6 years and then finally go to Japan and unload. That works too. For me, every single day I have to output while inputting. So I learned Duolingo, all this stuff, perfectly fine. Every evening, every time I turn on the stream, I've already prepared myself to talk about this stuff. So at any one moment, in my opinion, when a stranger offers me the opportunity to ask me a question, I get to practice all the things that I know, including Duolingo and stuff. So when someone asks, oh yeah, is Duolingo good? It's like, do you want a 20,000 word essay or do you want a 100 word shortcut? I have to determine that. So I ask them questions. Like I get excited when I get asked questions, or I get excited when someone makes a comment because it sounds like I always have something to say, largely because I'm excited and looking forward to doing so. When I'm off stream, you bet your butt I'm secretly observing things and not saying anything. I'm legitimately, when the stream goes off, I'm outputting 0. It's like very rare that I output anything that I consciously work on while streaming. What I'm not working on is outputting in different ways and inputting in different ways using Japanese. So like some people would say, oh, have you practiced conversations? And then usually it's a good question because I don't practice conversations in Japanese on stream. I do with myself in the evening and other things, which I'm not, like I haven't been able to show or find out how to do yet. So that will be later. But generally speaking, I work on the things I can work on, and they're trade-offs, right? I can't use WaniKani, it's a paid program. I can't use things like Squarespace, Brilliant, not sponsored by the way, and whatnot, but I can use Duolingo. So I work around all these things. And it's a great way to find people. What am I interested in? Getting people to learn language learning, but really I'm interested in doing the thing I do well while learning something. And the thing I do well is to get people to do things. And what I mean by that is I personally feel that I'm okay and above average in motivating people to do what they want. Like working on the things they want to do while at the same time trying to balance things that they need to do. So what platform would that be? Duolingo. Like if I had to learn language or do language learning, what is a product that attracts a lot of people who wants to start learning something? Why is it appropriate? It's Duolingo. Duolingo is a very appropriate thing to be using because you will encounter I will encounter a lot of the target audience that I'm prepared to talk to or address. I'm prepared to address all the hate comments, all the highly biased comments against Duolingo because I've already prepared for that. I gain more experience in counter arguing, all that stuff, while at the same time there are other people you have to be worried about, right? Beginners who want a low barrier of entry, who also needs some other inspirations on expanding past Duolingo, leaving Duolingo, right? Leaving me. That's kind of the idea. I'm pretty decent at that. I'm pretty decent at getting a first year college student. I'm pretty experienced at getting a first year college student who is culture shocked by how small their world was. And then now they're in college and now the world is gigantic. They're panicking. They got their first mediocre score, that type of thing. That's the environment I used to love. I love preventing or encouraging people from suddenly falling into the valley of despair and bringing them back out. And one day, maybe in the future, maybe when I'm like 60 or 70, I like to think that some of the videos and some of the things that I do, which eventually turned into some sort of outside business model that allows people to leave TikTok or balance TikTok or balance not having to watch 4 hours of their favorite streamer yell at the screen and scream obscenities or saying bro 300 times and not deciding to go out and make their own bro content, or that kind of thing. Like moderation, it might change completely. The landscape might change. Like YouTube might be subjected to encouraging others. All this landscape stuff is definitely dynamic. But my take here, my final message, so that we can get to completing our lesson. By the way, today's a half day, so don't worry about it. Like, this is review day, so I've already planned for doing a digression. I just didn't know which digression I was gonna lean on. That's my message. Yes, it's really bad for content creation. You have to keep in mind, if you know that the content creator is a job, right? If they're doing content creation as a job, the companies that run these things monetize and incentivize retaining. Okay? Retaining the viewer. And for me, I can't possibly in good conscience want to turn this into a job, because it is very difficult to keep saying, hey, go out, do different things, learn different things, fall in love. Like, just fall in love. If it's not with another person, with something else, right? So you can't do that if you're a content creator that needs to keep the person attached to you. But one thing I would love in the future is every once in a while, a person would come back and say, like, 3 years ago, I got a message. And 3 years now, I only wanted to spend the next 10 minutes telling you what I did in my last 3 years. And some part of that had something to do with maybe a few words I said. That'd be great. I think that's the biggest dream for a teacher, in my opinion. That's almost the biggest dream for like a parent, honestly. And I hope to experience that in the future with a kid of my own, right? Like when they go off, what you do is you have a fixed amount of years, like 18 years ideally, preparing a kid, and then you let them go. Let them go, and they come back, and every once in a while, 1 year or 2 years, they come back and it's like, dude, I'm knocking it out of the park. And that's kind of my mentality towards anything. I'm not here to offer you life hacks. I'm here to offer you my experiences, and I hope my experiences inspire a state of mind that allows you to be like, yeah, I can do whatever all these things I like, and I'll do it on my own at some point, right? To heck with needing Anki at some point. To heck with needing Duolingo at some point. All of the above. Every once in a while, I'll tap in and I'll show you how to make Duolingo better. I'll show you how to make Anki better. That's the kind of people that I hope are enlightened. Because products stay unremarkable and unevolving due to dependency, not because of independent thinkers. So the internet, in my opinion, needs more independent thinkers, or there needs to be a balance, a requirement of a balance of being inspirational and dependent, like addiction, right? Yeah, so many what did Cozy said? So many people jump on even though they're not experts. Indeed, it's scary for sure if you're not aware. Indeed, and I'm wrong. You're right. Yeah, come on, counter, but not with your with my car exhaust. Wait, what is the comment about my car exhaust? And this is a message for my future self as well. So if you don't think this is important or anything, then you're probably pretty successful and enlightened, right? Most of the comments I'm making is also for my future self, because one day I'll look back on these videos. So that's kind of the idea. Anyways, we're gonna try to finish our study session now. Good talk, good talk. Before that, I will take a quick bathroom break to mark this. Your work is over now. Going to studying clean. You'll catch me in future streams. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Keep on. Tell me something interesting that you learned, by the way, Greg, in your study next time. And whenever we talk again, let me know what was interesting that you learned, because I would love to hear about it. Best of luck. You can't remember, Cozy? Alright, alright. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break. I'll be right back.